It should take us there.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, this is so exciting. So nice that you are able to do this, and we're just thrilled to have you. So one of the things that I know people will be interested in when we get started at 8 o'clock is at some point, let's find out a little more about who you are and how you got into this. Tonight, this is absolutely true. I was talking to somebody who knew about this coming up, and they said, you know, for years I've wanted to be her. I wanted to be the photo detective. I wanted to do what she does, and I'm going to watch tonight.
Oh, that's so fun. I don't know. I told a friend once that they were like, "Oh my God, you're famous," and I was like, "You know, if I were truly famous, there'd be somebody here to do the laundry."
Oh man!
You still have to do the laundry.
And do we, Carrie, do we have, or afterwards, when we put this up, we'll be sure and add a link to the photo detective website?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. And
we will definitely share a link for that.
Yeah, and Maureen, so this is the stream live on Facebook. As we were just talking, perhaps with another platform, next week we'll also be streaming live to our website, historycamp.org/online. But in terms of tonight's broadcast, after we're done, roughly around midnight or so, it'll be uploaded and there with all the rest of our History Camp Online talks.
And I'll put it in my newsletter this week.
Thank you.
Next week.
Thank you.
Comes out on Wednesday.
Great, great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Make a note to that.
Yeah. Well, this is fun, and we always have a good group of folks. And you know, as I was telling Carrie, I know we'll have a great crowd, despite the fact, or in spite of the fact, that tonight is like the first night of professional football in quite some time, and it's the Super Bowl champs, and it's a big deal. People are going to show up instead for History Camp Online, and especially for Maureen Taylor. So
we will see. It is football after all.
All right. Hey, so I'm Lee Wright. I'm the founder of History Camp. I'm near Boston, and with me in Virginia is...
Hi, I'm Carrie Lund, the director of the Pursuit of History, and we are excited to have with us tonight Maureen Taylor, the photo detective. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Liam, Carrie, thank you so much for having me.
So, Maureen, I want to go to the project that I first heard about that I thought, I don't even know if that's possible. And it became The Last Muster. Tell us about photographs of men who fought in the Revolutionary War.
Well, you know, that project, it's been going on for so long now. Do you want to know how it started?
Yeah.
Okay, I was at a conference, and a long time ago now, almost 20 years ago, believe it or not. And a person came up to me and pulled out this little image out of their coat pocket and said, "This is my ancestor who spent the War of the Revolution in Bermuda as a loyalist."
Wow.
And I had already looked at a lot of photographs, right? Like people show me photographs all the time. They chase me down to show me photographs. And this guy pulls one out, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, there's the 1840 census. There's, this guy's still alive, was living in 1840. This guy's living in 1850s. I know about the history of photography. I was like, oh. And then I called David Lambert at the New England Historic Genealogical Society, who famously has a collection of old people from the 1860s. And I said, David, I think maybe there's a whole lot more going on here than we think, and we never even considered, because we knew about the 6, 7 guys by Hilliard and Last Men of the Revolution. But this is the first time I had ever considered that you might have one, Lee, or you might have one, Carrie, or somebody in the audience might have one in their collection. And I thought, oh, I wonder how many there are. I wonder how many there are. And I'm still asking that question all these years later. How many more could there possibly be?
So if by chance one of the folks watching tonight or later watching the tape has one in their collection, how do they get a hold of you?
They should just email me at photodetective@maureentaylor.com. They can reach me through my website. I have a little help button that sticks up. You can send me a message that way. I love to hear about it because I never know. Every time I think I'm done, there aren't any more, then a whole flurry of them come in. And I think, how many more are there? I mean, a dream would be to have an army of little researchers out in all these little historical societies looking for these images.
Right.
Because there are so many, more than anyone considered.
You have some and have some slides or photos where you're going to take us through a little bit of that, correct?
I do.
Let's do
Want
that.
me to get started?
Yeah.
Sure. Plus, I just want to say, we were talking before we went live about the naysayers. That in the early years of the project, I would go everywhere I went lecturing. I would go to the Historical Society or the State Historical Society, and I would walk in and say, this is what I'm looking for. And everyone would say, that's not possible. I'd say, it is possible. And what do you have? So then I stopped asking. I stopped asking for the last men and last women. And I just started saying, I would like to see all your daguerreotypes and ambrotypes of really old people. And then the rest is history. Hold on, let me go to the presentation. Here we are. So for me, this has been an amazing journey. One, I never even considered how long it would go on for. There are 2 volumes. Kent State University Press published both of these volumes. I searched for a publisher for a while and didn't have much luck. No one was really interested. Again, nobody really thought of anything that it was possible. I had a book agent at that point who was English, and he said, nobody's really interested in that. And so I went to Kent State and approached them and said, I have this idea, and I really love your books. They're beautifully produced, and here's my idea. It took 5 years to write the proposal, 10 years to write the first volume, and only 2 years to write the second volume, because once the first volume came out, a lot of people came forward and said, I have one of those. And some professional researchers came forward and said, not only do I have one of those, but here's all my research, and you can use it in the next book. The thing about volume 2 is there's more illustrations in the book. So I know for a fact that a lot of engravings in these mid-19th century books were based on, or some of them were based on daguerreotypes. Some of them actually say taken from a daguerreotype, but the original images are missing. But so take a look at volume 2, and maybe you not only have an image, but know where one of them is. So, I mean, that's 2 volumes. The last one came out in 2012. Oops. There we go. And this was sort of my inspiration for all of it. This is in Benson Lossing's book, Field Book of the American Revolution, which I have to admit is one of my favorite books. And he said in the preface that our own are the last eyes that will look on men who looked on Washington, and that our ears are the last that will hear the living voices of those who heard his words. Henceforth, the American Revolution will be known among men by the silent record of history alone. But when I do this research, not only do the photographs sort of speak to me, it's the research that you do when you research these Revolutionary War men and women who speak to you, because they left their writings in pension reports. And very quickly it became, Kent State really guided me on this, and they were like, how are you going to do this? We need a whole diversity of people in these books. And then when I brought them the proposal, they were like, you actually did it. And I'm like, yeah. There's a lot of different people who served in the American Revolution. There are women. And it became, how do I tell the story of this generation? Is it possible to tell the story of a generation through the existing photographs that exist or engravings that exist. And I will say that one of the most surprising parts of this was that a lot of these people that lived into the age of photography after 1839 actually served at a very young age, or they accompanied their parent, their father. And then what's the sad part is, while there were so many more women that survived their husbands, we have hardly any photographs of them. And I'm always looking for them, just like I'm always looking for pictures of loyalists in Canada. I wrote letters all over to all the historical societies in Canada, I think. No pictures. And their stories are compelling. Like George Avery of Dedham, Massachusetts, right? In his in the genealogy, there's an excerpt from his memoir, and he talks about what he was like at 17, sort of a wild 17-year-old boy. But then he finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he's taken prisoner. And he barely escapes with his life 2 years later. And it's a remarkable story. Or one of the saddest stories is Esther Damon. And it's sad because she was a lot younger than her husband. She dies in 1904. She marries him when he's 75 and she's 21. And he sold her a story about the fact that he was wealthy and all this kind of stuff. And she married him and found out that he was completely poor and she had to support him. And the town was annoyed with her for even marrying him and attached her wages for his support. But in the end, the Daughters of the American Revolution in the state of Vermont stepped up and helped support her, in addition to campaigning to get her an increase in the pension. But I think she's a great story. And there's just so many great stories. Each and every one of them is different because each and every one of these people's experience during the war was different. And then, if it wasn't enough to do the books, these two folks came by, and this is Pam Pacelli Cooper and Rob Cooper of Verissima Productions, Somerville, Massachusetts. And I was giving a lecture at it's an organization that's not there anymore, Association of Personal Historians. And I was giving a keynote on this, the last muster. And Pam came up to me and said, "Have you ever thought of making a film about these people?" And I was like, "That's an interesting idea." Took us 5 years. We did a Kickstarter. We raised $30,000. We raised a little bit more money after that, just a year ago, and finally finished 3 short films, the stories of 3 of the patriots. Molly Ferris Aiken of Pawling, New York, there's a great legend associated with her. Agrippa Hull of Western Massachusetts, African-American, Native American man who served with all these amazing people. And the Eliezer, what's his name? Anyway, from New Hampshire, sorry, it's 8 o'clock. I worked all day. Eliezer Blake and of New Hampshire. They're all on my website. You can watch them. They're free. We made the decision to make the films free. And somebody said to me not too long before we were working on the thing, they were like, "Well, what else would you like to see happen with all these last muster things?" And I said, "Well, I'd really, really love to see a museum exhibit. I think a museum exhibit would be amazing to share all this knowledge to kids as an educational thing." And here we are filming at Molly Ferris Aiken's descendants' house. They had trunks full of stuff in their house that had been passed down for generations. Everybody was so great on that project. The Concord Museum in 2014 ran an exhibit of the last muster. They claim it was one of the most well-attended exhibits that they've had. And on the other side was an exhibit called The Shot Heard Around the World, which was artifacts mostly from their collections and from things that they had found all about April 19th. I mean, this is it makes me speechless when I was putting this together and I thought, oh, this and this. I mean, I'm not thinking about the trajectory of it all. I'm just doing one thing at a time, and opportunities come up. But the most amazing part of this whole process was the wall and the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. I get teary when I see all of their faces backlit so that they look normal. There's Caesar in the center, owned by several generations of the same family. Balthus Stone with the little cap on his head. He was found in an estate sale outside of Philadelphia and sold by Sotheby's. Each and every one of them have a story to tell. And I mean, I don't know. It's just more than I had ever considered when I asked that question. How many are there, and what are we going to do with this?
You know, Maureen, I've been to the Museum of the American Revolution, saw that, didn't know you're behind it. It's really fabulous.
Well, I'm not really behind it, but they knew of my books. I ran into the guy, Scott Stevenson, at an antique show in Newport, Rhode Island a few years ago. And I went up and I introduced myself, and he was like, I know exactly who you are. And we're doing a memorial wall of a lot of the pictures that are in your books. He goes, thank you. I was like, thank you for putting them up on the wall.
It's fabulous.
And it's amazing to see people go through this hallway. It's the end of the museum. It's the end of the exhibit. And they stare at the wall of these people, and people start talking about the individuals. I don't know. It leaves me speechless. And I do have more images, actually. I had a summer intern this summer who did some preliminary research for me on all these images I've collected from various places. Some of them I've actually bought. I found them sort of misidentified places, and hope eventually to do another volume, to do a third volume.
So how many unique individuals have you found so far?
There's 150 in volume 1. I think there's 75 in volume 2. That's 225. Yep. Depending on how many of them actually pan out for volume 3, more than somewhere around probably 300.
That is fascinating. Now, do you have more slides to look at now?
I do. I have more slides to look at. I have my other project, I got distracted 20 years on a project, and it's like, I need a new thing. So I live in Providence, Rhode Island, and I created a website with chronocharts.com. It is a georeferencing crowdsourcing site for the history of Providence, Rhode Island. And it's oldpvd.com, and it's free. Anybody can go on. Anyone can add their memories. Anyone can add images, create an archive. And the way it works is this is sort of the main screen where you can filter by maps. So there are 3 maps, so you can actually travel in time back. There are markers, which is what you create when you add an image. So you give a name of the building if there is one, a little bit of history if you have it, and the date the building was constructed, which, believe it or not, is one of the hardest pieces of information to come by. And then you can discover historical and architectural facts, and you can go on the map, you can search, and on the map are these little dots. And the inspiration for this is the Old New York City project, and also History Pin, which is a georeferencing kind of thing. But this is very specific to the city of Providence. You click on one of these and it breaks down even more. You click on one of these little teardrops and it takes you to a marker for that location where you can then add information. We launched it last July, so it's only a year old. And then here's the 1835 map. So if you, the numbers changed because you've got a lot of buildings pinned to the map with a date. So here's the population here. Just take a look at this little area right here, down here, this sort of Fox Point area of Providence. And then when you go to the 1834 map, there's a lot fewer because there were fewer of the markers date from after that point. This is not an up-to-date slide. We now have 11 participants, organizations that have agreed to let me add images. And because I got my start as a photo curator at the Rhode Island Historical Society years ago, which is where I came to be the photo person, the genealogist, the local history, all sort of rolled in together working at a historical society. And so over the years and doing picture research and doing local history, I know that there are pictures everywhere. And from my work as the photo detective, I know that people often have the best stuff in their private personal collections. They don't think of it that way, but I know where the stuff is. I like to joke that I know where the bodies are. I know where the pictures are. And I really want them for the site. I want to put them all together so that school groups and historians and just average amateur historians can look at this site and understand the city better.
You know, Maureen, that is such an interesting project. So I'm familiar with History Pen. I'm not familiar with this platform, but
we developed this platform.
Did you?
Yeah.
Is it, are you guys thinking about open sourcing it or offering it on a hosted basis?
You can go to the chronocharts.com website for that. Okay. I'm not actually marketing the product. Mike Broner is the guy behind Chronocharts. But this is a completely proprietary platform created specifically for me, but adaptable for other places.
Well, that is great. I did a talk in 2015 where I talked about exactly this issue and said, in our town, for example, there was a historic property survey, and that's interesting, but I have no ability to add anything to that. And so when our house dates to 1780, when a man and his wife drove up and said, I was born in this house, and he at that point was in his 80s, and then he brought me pictures and so forth, right? There's nothing I could, those are in our collection. There's no way I can share it. And it's exactly, you've done exactly what we needed.
Exactly. So look at this list. Library of Congress, they have Providence images. Lippitt House Museum down the street from me, they have a huge collection. When I started working on this, I started collecting, which is something I never really did for local history because I thought the museums should have them. Pond Street Projects are personal. Providence City Archives, tons of images. Providence Preservation Society, they have all the marker houses and no way to update any of that information. The State Archives, the best collection is the Society of Colonial Dames. So the Colonial Dames in 1930, had volunteers, and this happened in all the 13 colonies, went around and photographed buildings that were constructed before 1830. So in 1930, they're photographing all these buildings. And I had them all scanned last summer.
Outstanding.
And so gradually, I think it's like 900 images.
That's fabulous. So
it's a slow process.
But so this is a project I wasn't familiar with, and one of the things that I would like to talk with you about, after this evening or whatever, is what we can do to bring more light on efforts such as this. we've kind of termed them as history makers.
Yes.
Ways that different media, different platforms, different projects engage people broadly with history.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just fabulous. Well, so any other?
And one more slide.
Yep.
The shameless pitch for my podcast.
Well,
The Photo Detective. This week I have Mike Medhurst of the Daguerrean Society talking about photo fakes, 19th century photo fakes. If you notice, it's episode 96. So I'm having a big splash for episode 100. Can't quite imagine. It's available wherever your podcasts are, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher. And then I'm trying to get off the ground a little podcast on old Providence. The original concept for that podcast was interviewing the COVID crisis is killing small businesses. And there's a lot of small family-owned businesses in Providence and in Rhode Island in general. And today I went to this little shopping area not too far from my house, and I was like, yep, another one bit the dust. So I was trying to reach out and interview businesses that had been in business for more than 20 years. But everybody's pretty busy, the COVID craziness. They're just trying so hard to stay afloat. So I'm working on a different idea right now, not giving up on that idea completely, but I don't want to talk about it yet because it's just now getting off the ground.
We know the COVID crisis is one thing, but even before that, I know, for example, Harvard Square, Harvard Square, that real estate has become so valuable. The businesses that are able to afford the real estate are national brands, right? So this kind of homogenization of what was otherwise this very local entity.
It's very sad.
Yeah. Well, so another thing I wanted to ask you about is, so people approach you and say, how do I find out who this is? When was this picture taken? Where was it taken? What can you tell me about it? Is
right.
that correct?
Yeah, that's what I do in my main part. I mean, I have all these special projects, which I don't even know how I have time for them. But that's what I do as the photo detective. People come to me and they say, I have this photograph. And for most people, it is that one picture that they'll have boxes of them, right? Mostly without names, but there's one picture that speaks to them. And they want to know more about it. How can they learn more about it? And I help them do that.
So would you tell us about some of the things you look for and perhaps some of the interesting surprises along the way?
Sure. I think I actually have the one that's obsessed me for years. Oh, maybe I put him away. I might have put him away. I bought an image at an antique shop with a name on it, and I've become completely, totally obsessed with him. Arthur sits on my desk. How do I do that? So I look at things like, what are they wearing? What format is the image? Is that a copy? Is it the original? What are they doing in the image? Is there any information on it? Is there a caption? Is the caption correct? Often people come to me and they say, in the family, it's been told that this is this person. And I can look at it and say, well, maybe yes, or maybe no, but let's go through the steps of identifying it and studying it in the context of your family history. Sometimes the answer is absolutely not. And people have gotten it confused. Like maybe there's 3 generations of the guy with the same name or the woman with the same name. And it becomes people know more than they think they know. And so it's an interview process. And then the most exciting part of it is when somebody comes to me with a photograph and I date it for them. And I say, okay, so this is the date of the photo. And there's a pause on the other end of the phone or the video, because sometimes I do these either phone or video, and anyone can sign up through my website. But I say the date and they say, oh, I don't have my family back that far. And I'm like, well, you got this.
That is very
It
cool.
gives me a chill every time. I'm like,
Yes.
why is that the photograph that becomes the obsession when your research isn't even back that far?
Yeah, yeah. So that is fascinating. Answer a question that I think many of us have had, and we may have have heard the right answer or not. Why was it that people did not smile?
Oh, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it? When we like to time travel and say, why didn't you smile for that picture? There's a couple of theories. There's always that bad teeth theory, but I think it was it was a serious thing to go, how many paintings do you see of people smiling? So when you went for a picture, like a photograph, you didn't smile. It was you wanted to look serious. You didn't want to look foolish.
That's a very interesting observation. And I think the language, at least I remember older relatives talking about having the picture made, not their picture taken, the picture made.
That's right. That's right. And certainly that was true with the daguerreotype.
Yeah, and so that's one other thing I wanted to touch on. Then we've got several questions I want to go to. Do you want to take us through those early days on photography and what? So I know that's a whole topic unto itself. But if you could kind of just take us through some of the major milestones that resulted in it being possible for perhaps a person of middle class means or someone that's a soldier or whatever, right, that saved a lot of money, to actually have their picture made.
The study of early photography is fascinating because there is still so much unknown. Imagine everyone's in their basement tinkering with, Daguerre has made his announcement, Talbot's made his announcement in England in that 1839 period, but people have been tinkering with the idea of a permanent image for, I don't know, at least 10 years before that. And then they make their announcement and then people are like, well, this is possible. And then everybody's tinkering with it. They're making their own cameras. They're taking pictures. They're trying to figure it out. How can we make this happen? And then there's all that improvement that happens as well, because once you've done it, then it's like, how can we make it better? What else can we do? And then there's the addition of color. One of the things a long time ago, early in my career, I was asked to research early daguerreotypists in Providence, and did so, and wrote an article or two on it, and thought paper photography came along. Didn't really look at the history of paper photography, but just in the last year, there's some historians working on a documentary on Gorham manufacturing, the big silver manufacturing here in Providence. And they needed someone to talk about early photography in Rhode Island. And they came to me and I said, well, it's been a while. Let me go back and do some more research. And before I get on camera and make a fool of myself. And I discovered that the paper photography industry here in Providence and probably in other cities, here it dated from about 1852, which was earlier than I had considered. So now I'm on the lookout for early images, but there's so much not known, not written down. So like the picture of Agrippa Hull, for instance, it's a painting that hangs in the Stockbridge Library in Massachusetts. It's based on a daguerreotype. The daguerreotype was made by Anson Clark, and he developed he made his own camera, which I actually saw, and he tinkered with all the chemicals and wrote them in a notebook. But because the image, because he tinkered so much, no one actually knows the exact mixture that he used to create the image. So now the daguerreotype has completely, almost totally faded away. And there's nothing that can be done for it because it's gone to a number of conservators and they're all like, There's just so much not known. It's sort of like the Wild West. It's like everybody in their basement's making an iPhone.
Well, that's fascinating. So we're going to go to Carrie and some of the questions that some of the people watching have asked. Carrie?
All right, so first one, let's just clarify this for people.
Oops.
Oops.
A Zoom freeze.
You know what? We've been, Carrie just had sent me a note a minute ago saying she was having some connectivity issues. Why don't I do this? Let me, Carrie, what do you say? Should we try it again?
All right, sorry, I am back. All right, the 3 videos that you talked about, where can people go to watch those?
They can go to maureentaylor.com, and then on the menu, projects and revolutionary voices. And they're all available.
Okay.
Watch them, stream them, do what you will. Oh.
Carrie, I think I'm gonna continue on with some of the questions. Why don't I go ahead and do that? So do you have any sense of, over this kind of early period, how the number of painted portraits compared to photographs taken of the Revolutionary era Americans?
There are more paintings because the paintings predate photography. So I'm trying to think of a statistic right now. The 1852 pension report mentions, and I don't have all those numbers right in front of me, but there were like 300,000 men who served, is an estimate I've heard. Obviously not all of them had painted portraits. Some of them had busts and other types of artistic work done. So by the time photography comes along, there's a lot fewer veterans and their wives still living, although way more wives than you would imagine. Probably triple.
Got it. Carrie, are you back? Do you want to ask the next question?
I am back. Let's cross our fingers. Okay, we have a viewer who wants to have a better understanding of how.
Oh.
Ooh. So I'll make an announcement on Carrie's behalf. Next week, we're going to try another platform. And interestingly enough, Carrie and I were just doing tests last evening, and that convinced us that we're Zoom and Vimeo, the way we're using them with Facebook and so forth, not sufficiently stable. Found another platform, and as we were chatting in advance of the talk, Maureen said, let me tell you about this really great platform. So we're going to try it next week.
It'll hook right up to your Facebook page.
Excellent. All right, Carrie, are you back?
I'm back. All right. So we have a viewer who wants to know how Old Providence compares to using something like Google Earth. Could they find similar information, or why would it be more compelling to use Old Providence?
So Google Earth is Google Earth. I mean, you can go backwards in time or whatever. The images on Old Providence are mostly unique, things that people have not seen before, either from private collections or public collections. And everything is marked with a watermark telling you which collection that image comes from. So they're unique to the site for the most part.
Okay, wonderful. I have played around on that a little bit, and it's really interesting. I love how you've done it.
Thank you.
It's great information on there.
So
all right,
let me throw out one other question, and I don't know if you saw this, Carrie, but when a person was having their photo made, what was that process? What was that sitting like? How long did it take?
Well, I actually just interviewed someone for the podcast for a few episodes in advance, and we were talking. He has spent his last several years researching daguerreotype cases and ambrotype cases, and he knows an awful lot about early photography. And He was sort of correcting some misinformation that's been out there. There's stories about how you had to sit for 30 minutes to have your picture taken. In fact, you did not. The cameras were good enough to capture you pretty quickly. And don't ask me exactly how quickly, but pretty quickly. Definitely not, under a minute. So that relates to that question you asked about why didn't people smile? So the story is, oh, they didn't smile because they couldn't hold the pose that long. Well, in fact, they could hold the pose that long. They just didn't want to smile.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, that is great, Maureen. Carrie, do you want to talk to us about what's ahead?
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Next week, we have Jamie Holmes on with us, and he has written a World War II book called 12 Seconds of Silence, and it is about the American scientist who developed a weapon to take down the Nazi superweapon that was working its terror on London. So that will be an interesting story. Hope you all will join us for that. Thank you so much, Maureen, for your time tonight and for sharing the fascinating projects that you work on.
And Maureen, we're thrilled. We are hoping that everything works out and that we will have History Camp Boston in person, and that you'll be able to join us hopefully in July. I know people would be thrilled to meet you in person.
Fingers are crossed. Thank you so much. I love the fact that History Camp is online and you have the most fascinating people coming on. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be on this.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Looks like we may still be live.